This is a 43mm Showa from a 916, and I'm just going to pull the cartridge out to see what's at the bottom of this one, to see if it will work. Yeah. Looks like it's not going to come out. If you can't get these cartridge bolts to come out, sometimes a quick zap with the rattle gun is enough to get them to move. That's the bottom bolt, which is the compression adjuster as well. The bottom of the cartridge, this one's been sitting for a long time, so it's very mucky, but there's a bush in there that goes into. There it is. That little bit there, that goes on like so, and it's much smaller than the one in the 41s. It's not a cup as such, and the spring goes over it. That's all I wanted to know. This is the preload tube that sits underneath the spring in these 916 style forks, and it has a wash that sits on top, and the fork spring sits on that, and then the rest of the preload assembly goes on top. So that spacer fits over that, and that's all I wanted to know. I'm going to put some heavier rate, shorter springs in this fork, and so I'm probably going to use longer tubes under the spring and all the standard tubes on top. But first, I just needed to know what the bottom of the fork was like inside, apart from dirty. In these 916 forks, I'm fitting these springs, which are a YSS 1.1 kilogram spring. We've got a part number on the end. It actually says KBA at one point. And KBA, I think, are the company that actually makes most of the fork springs. Don't know anything else apart from that, but I think that's where most of your fork springs come from. This is the original spring, which is about a 1 kilo rate. This is a 1.1. You can see it's a little bit shorter. So we need to add some preload tube length to get the right preload. But I wouldn't just measure the difference in the springs and add that to the preload tube, because that assumes that the original preload range is what I want. And I just don't make assumptions like that. I measure it. Because we're here, we can measure it. So what I'll do is reassemble it with all the original bits. So original preload tube, washer on top with the sharp edge towards the spacer. New fork spring. Preload tube, put the tube on the end of the cartridge. I should have done that first. Oops, that's just so I can pull it up. And the steel washer that goes on top of the plastic. And our cap with the long adjuster rod. And I'm going to wind this in 15 clicks. And that's going to set our default position for the cap. I still can't even see it. Okay. What I need to do first. So I measure how far the top of this is above the top of the fork leg. and it is 79 millimeters. And when I fit the cap, we'll find out what the compressed setting is, or even if it goes that far. I don't think it will have, well, it shouldn't have any preload on it for sure. So wind this down until it bottoms. Should be soon. And so that's it fitted. Just going to make sure that this nut is all the way down, because it occurred to me that it should, I don't think it was, wind that nut all the way down first, because this should bottom out on the bottom of the needle before it hits the nut. I'm still not even convinced it is. Oh, there's a little bit of movement there. It's a little bit of a gap. With the cap pulled all the way up, that's where it will sit in the fork, and so that is 86 millimeters. So we have a 7 millimeter gap, which means that if I want 10 millimeters base preload with the adjuster wound all the way out, I need to add 7 plus 10 to this length for our new spacer at the bottom. So 17 millimeters. Let's pull it all apart again. This spacer is 100 millimeters long exactly. So we need this in 117 millimeters. What I'm using for my preload spacer is a piece of aluminium tube. It's 38.2 millimeters OD and about 2.2 mil wall thickness. And it's just a basic off-the-shelf piece of aluminium tube out here in Australia. So we'll drop that in. Washer, spring, screw the tube on, preload tube, cap, steel washer, make sure it's all located properly, and now the top is poking out 96 millimeters. So we're going to fit a fork cap, which is again at 15. 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. This time I'll need to use the tools and compress it all properly. Once you start getting springs over 1 kilo, it starts to get a bit harder to compress them. So you'll want all the help you can get. There we go. So wind this on. It stops. Up. And that distance is 87. So 96 to 87 is 9 millimeters. So we've got 9. That should be enough. With the adjuster all the way out, we've still got about 14 mil potential adjustment, preferably not all the way in, but that should be fine. Tip it all out again. Now you put the oil in and do all that. I might make it a touch longer. I was curious, so I thought I'd check the springs. The originals are 276 and the replacements are 260, so 16 millimeters difference in the springs. So you probably could have just made a preload spacer the difference in the spring, but I like to go by a minimum preload setting so I know exactly where they are, just in case you don't check it and it turns out to be way off for some reason.